Deemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I appreciate you again tuning into the program. Again, follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show, wherever I am on social media. You can subscribe to the podcast, thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com are also places where you can subscribe. Please be sure to support my sponsors that make all of this possible. MyPillow.com, Mike Lindell and his fabulous company, MyPillow, is offering all types of great deals, 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantees, deals up to 60% off. All you have to do is go to MyPillow.com, click on that radio listener square and use the promo code Carl. Go to MyPillow.com and browse. They got all types of stuff there, from sheets to mattress toppers to slippers, you name it, stuff that's going to make you sleep good, stuff that's going to make you feel good. So go to MyPillow.com. Also, you can give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Don't forget to subscribe to Epic TV. That's right, Epic TV. You guys may have seen me. I was on Larry Elder's show. Recorded yesterday. So I hope you guys got a chance to check that out. But you can go to Epic TV. As a matter of fact, you can subscribe and get a fabulous deal. All you have to do is go to watchepic.com/Carl Jackson. That's watchepic.com/Carl Jackson, and you spell epic, or some say epoch, EPOCH. That is watchepic.com/Carl Jackson. You're going to get the unbiased news. You're going to get news that is truthful. You're going to get journalists that are resilient. They don't mess around at Epic TV. Plus, you can watch their shows like Crossroads. You can watch the Larry Elder Show, Facts Matter, American Thought Leaders, and documentaries investigating issues that no one else will cover. So check them out. Again, watchepic.com/Carl Jackson. Watchepic.com/Carl Jackson. And don't forget my friends at the Patriot Gold Group. We need to bring them on, as a matter of fact, because we need to talk about people need to get their money in order. Listen, if you have some investments, you're tired of seeing your stock portfolio going down the drain, maybe take a little bit of that money. Talk to my friends at the Patriot Gold Group. You can mention the Carl Jackson Show. You'll get the best in-class service from patriots that are protecting patriots. You can give them a call at 888-534-3665. Listen, they offer a free investor guide. So if you give them a call at 888-534-3665, they will hook you up with that free investor guide today. Make sure that you tell them the Carl Jackson Show sent you. That is Patriot Gold Group, patriotgoldgroup.com. Make sure you tell them the Carl Jackson Show sent you. Okay, let's get to the issue that I'd like to talk about today. You know, I've been, just like many of you that are on the right, the political right in the United States of America, not to be confused with the right in Parliament in Europe. A lot of people mistake that. The right in Parliament is totally different from the right in the United States. You know, when they talk about leftists and rightists in Parliament or in Europe, they talk about which areas, or these people are seated in the Parliament in Europe. If you're commie, you're on the far left. If you're an anarchist, you're on the far the far right. But that isn't our system here in the United States. And so I kind of want to explain our system a little bit, and I want to ask you if you know the difference. So I want to challenge you a little bit. And I wrote down some notes, and now I have misplaced my notes because sometimes, like a fool, I scrabble my notes everywhere. Okay. All right. So, but I want to make sure that you know the difference, and I want to go through this. I'm going to encourage every single one of you out here. This is one of the best books that I've ever read, and I constantly use it as a go-to. You can see that I've got little notes and dictations and stuff in there. But I keep notes. I'll go back and I'll reference it. It's called The 5,000 Year Leap. Did you see the title of that? Did you guys see the 5,000 Year Leap? Make sure that you have that on your bookshelf. And I always use it as a reference book, the principles of our founding documents, the principles that our founding fathers embraced. Very, very important. But I want to talk to you today about ruler's law versus people's law. Rulers being the people that are in charge, obviously our political leaders that are in charge, and some that are trying to be wannabe dictators. We'll talk about that, as well as people's law. And that's what the founders were looking for. The founders didn't want anarchy. They didn't want where there was absolutely no government control, absolute chaos. no rule whatsoever. People just going buck wild in the streets. They didn't want any of that. They didn't want Antifa running the country, nor did they want tyrants running the country. They didn't want. They wanted a rule of law. They wanted a balanced center, is what they called it. So they wanted a government that fell somewhere between anarchy, where people, had a sense of control of their government, but where there wasn't total chaos or total tyranny, where dictators, despots, where political leaders can control the people. So they look for the balanced center. That is why our Bill of Rights is in place. That's why they framed the Constitution and the way that they did, where they gave we the people the power. But what's been increasingly baffling to me, and I remember Rush Limbaugh talking about this, and I remember Ron Paul talking about this. I wasn't a big fan of Ron Paul at the time. I said some pretty disparaging things about Ron Paul when he was running for president. To be fair and honest with you, there were some things that he did at the time that I looked on and I didn't like. But now maybe I have to go back and research. Who knows? Those could have been that could have been misinformation or disinformation by the deep state, as far as I know. I don't trust our bureaucratic agencies anymore. I hope you don't either. We should always be skeptical of big government. But what the founders intended and what they've done is completely brilliant with the United States of America, and we're at risk of throwing that away. So I want to talk to you about ruler's law versus people's law, because it is we the people in the United States that have the power. And what the left is trying to do is they're trying to consolidate power with the central government, with the federal government. They want everything to be run from Washington, D.C. Here's the problem. Guys, if you're a Democrat listening, a liberal listening to this podcast, they don't know you. They don't care about you. All they see in Washington, D.C. are numbers that that they hang around with their rich elite friends. They're extremely out of touch with the people that live in their own districts and in their own states oftentimes. So you shouldn't trust politicians. Listen, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I trust conservatives to be at least more honest and more in touch with the people than the left, because the left typically just wants to control their voters. But Republicans do a horrible job of listening to their voters. And so we should always be skeptical of government. And the founding fathers wanted us to be skeptical of a centralized government. We should always be skeptical of that. I'd rather have conspiracy theorists than naive sheep that listen to the government and follow them hook, line, and sinker. All right, so here's what the founding fathers came up with. There's ruler's law, where basically you would have dictators. There's people's law. That's where you and I fall into place. Or there's total anarchy. That's where the Antifas and the Black Lives Matter of the world, where there's absolutely no law, no consequences would reign. We don't want that. And we don't want a dictatorial regime. We don't want to live under a Xi Jinping. At least I hope not. Now, some NBA players might want to, or at least they think they want to, unless they were actually a Chinese citizen. But we don't want that as Americans. This is the best country. I don't care what color you are. Stop giving me that excuse. I don't see you checking out of America and bum rushing someone else's border. So until I see you do that, I won't believe that you believe this is a bad country. All right, prove it. Leave. All right. That's when I'll believe you. All right. So the founders seemed anxious, according to the 5,000-year leap, that modern man recognized the subversive characteristics of oppressive rulers. Law, which they identify primarily with the tyrannical monarchy. That's what Joe Biden is trying to become. Here are its basic characteristics as the book outlines. And I just want to go through these and just indulge me. I'm going to do a little reading here. Promise not to make it boring, but I just want you to think about this. This is ruler's law. So if we lived under a dictatorial regime, these are the things that you would have to be concerned about. And this is what the founding fathers didn't want us to have to be concerned about. So authority under ruler's law is nearly always established by force, by violence, or by conquest. All right. So that's what we left from. That's what we got away from. The other day, I was talking to you about reparations, the ultimate reparation podcast. Make sure you go back and listen to that. But the way that the world was established, blacks were slaves, blacks enslaved people, Native Americans were slaves, Native Americans enslaved people, Europeans were slaves, Europeans enslaved people. Nobody was free from guilt when it came to slavery. The way of the world was violence. All right. We tribes, different nation states killed people, took prisoners, took slaves. That was the way of the world until the founding of the United States of America. This is where slavery ended. All right. This is where slavery ended. So that was the way of the world. Number two, Therefore, all sovereign power is considered to be in the conqueror of his descendants. All right. So again, therefore, all sovereign power is considered to be in the conqueror or his descendants. So all the power of the federal government would rely on or be in the hands of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Or if it was Donald Trump, you may hate Donald Trump. Listen, I don't care. I'd rather you hate Donald Trump than not get this. I like Donald Trump, but I understand some people don't. What's important is to not get bogged down in the personality, but to understand ruler's law versus people's law. You don't want somebody to come into power that you don't like, that you don't trust, to be able to reside in power for as long as they want to, and then pass that power down to their son. Think of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. You know, those people even aren't allowed to get any type of news outside of North Korea, and they believe that little fat chubby punk is a god. All right. Number 3, the people are not equal, but are divided into classes and are looked upon as subjects of the king. All right. So that's the way Washington, D.C. looks at us now. I think we're getting dangerously close to that. But this is ruler's law. Do you think the politicians in Washington, D.C. think we're equal with them? No, the founders didn't want this. I'm sorry, politicians shouldn't be stars. You know, we shouldn't have the Barack and Michelle Obamas making tons and tons of freaking money being stars after they're in the presidency. But that's what they've become. That's what our nation has become, sadly. Number 4, the entire country is considered to be the property of the ruler. He speaks of it as his realm. All right. And this is the power that I think the federal government thinks they have. Look at Joe Biden. We don't have any sovereignty. Our borders are wide open. SCOTUS shut down or kept Title 42 in place. But that isn't the job of the Supreme Court to keep Title 42 in place. That is the job of the executive to keep this nation safe and to secure this nation. But Joe Biden looks at the entire country as his property. He can do whatever he wants with it. He can invite whomever he wants into the country. He can allow China to build, or buy property near military bases. I'm sorry, the executive should be saying, not just in the federal government, but in states, China, you can't buy any property out here. We can't buy any property in China. But this is the way these people look at it. If they want eminent domain, if they want to come to your house, the federal government, and say, we're going to take that, you know, this is the stuff that the founders didn't necessarily want. There are times or legitimate cases for eminent domain. I won't get into that right now. Number 5, the thrust of governmental power is from the top down, not from the people upward. So the power from the government is from the top down. So whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, what they say you have to do. Is that the America you really want? Because that's the America that we're going towards. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you need to understand ruler's law versus people's law. Number 6, the people have no unalienable rights. In other words, rights given to us by God. The king giveth and the king taketh away. So when God says you have a right to free speech, or we believe that God has given us, he's given us a mouth, he's given us a voice, he's given us the ability to speak. But and then you get a federal government coming in like Joe Biden and his administration that is using Twitter and they're trying to shut down our free speech. Now, you may say, good, they're shutting down right-wing craziness. Well, what happens when they shut down left-wing craziness? You see how this works? That's why it's so much more important. The founding fathers get it. They weren't interested in political parties. That's the problem that we have today. We assume that because we align with a certain political party, our values are correct. No, the only reason that I vote Republican is because their values tend to be more closely aligned with mine. But when they don't go there, I don't vote for them. I don't vote for them. Now, typically, I'm not going to lie to you, in a general election, I do. I typically fill down the ballot because the left is filled, or the Democrat Party is filled with leftists. But we want to make sure that we have the ability to speak out, to share our voice, to protest, to be able to defend ourselves with whatever weapon. I like a gun, but with whatever weapon you choose. All right. Number 7, government is by the whims of men, not by the fixed rule of law, which the people need in order to govern their affairs with confidence. It's like Joe Biden is just totally abolishing the Constitution. Just totally abolishing it when it comes to abortion, when it comes to free speech, when it comes to taxes and the IRS, when it comes to our immigration policy, right? When it comes to the military, we don't get to vote on whether or not our soldiers freaking go to war because we're in a proxy war, whether you want to believe it or not. Our energy, he just dismantles our energy, makes us energy dependent. Prices are getting ready to go up again. And this is a shame. We don't want one guy calling all the shots. So we don't want a guy ruling by his or her whims. We want somebody that is confined to the Constitution, that is confined to the rule of law. This is what people need in order to have a stable government where people can thrive. Number 8, the ruler issues edicts, which are called the law. He then interprets the law and enforces it, thus maintaining tyrannical control over the people. I fear this with these bureaucratic agencies. I fear this with how Biden has used the CDC. He's using the IRS. He used NIH, NIAID to tell us that we're mandated to get something put into our bodies. All right. Listen, the government doesn't have the right to do that, nor should they have the right. And those of you that are so willing and so weak and so naive to say that, yeah, you should get this put in your body. Well, what if the government told you had to get something put in your body? It's crazy. Under rulers, law problems are always solved by issuing more edicts or laws. This is why I don't like regulations. This is what the federal government seems to get away with. You'll hear people all the time on the left and rarely on the right, but sometimes on the right too. We need to regulate this. We need to regulate. No. Everything needs to go through the legislative process. If we get to a point where we have to regulate this, you got the CDC, you got FDA, they need to regulate. It's because government is way too big and out of control, and we need to scale it down big time. All right. So under rulers, law problems are always solved by issuing more edicts or laws. In my opinion, those are regulations today, setting up more bureaus, harassing the people with more regulators, and charging the people for these services by continually adding to their burden of taxes, including IRS agents that will be hunting us down. Number 10, as far as rulers' law, this is what a dictator would want. Freedom is never looked upon as a viable solution to anything. So the answer is never, hey, freedom, what can the people do? We have a lot of smart people living inside of the United States. Let them be innovative. Let them invent things. Let them use their God-given talents, right? Let them use their God-given talents to make this country even better. No, instead, it's people that were elected that could be dumb as hell, like Joe Biden, that are saying, I'm smarter than you. And everybody and their mother knows that Joe Biden is dumber than a box of rocks, all right? Be honest about it. Let's be honest. He's dumb, all right? So we want freedom to be our solution. We want the people to be our solution to our nation's problems. All right. The long history of rulers' law, number 11, is one of blood and terror, both anciently and in modern times. Under it, the people are stratified into an aristocracy of the ruler's preference, while the lot of the common people is one of perpetual poverty. Excess of taxation, stringent regulations, and continuous existence of misery. So consider this. This is the way that I would put it. I'm going to change it slightly. I used to say, or I often do say when I'm on air, that when it comes to Democrats aren't successful unless you're unsuccessful. Meaning Democrats want to keep you in perpetual poverty in order to be successful. Now, the same, with the Republican Party, why I tend to vote for the Republican Party is the Republican Party up until now, particularly with this omnibus bill that they just helped pass. But traditionally, the Republican Party wasn't a successful party unless you became successful, meaning their platform was built towards individual freedom, individual prosperity, making sure the individual can achieve the American dream. That's what the Republican Party used to be about. That's not what tyrants want. Tyrants want a permanent underclass. They want illegal aliens living in the shadows, so people will be so that people will constantly depend on Uncle Sam for welfare. They want black families and Latino families to break up, but predominantly black families. They've destroyed the black community by destroying the black family. And what do you have? You have a bunch of single baby mamas that are on welfare, depending on Uncle Sam, while daddy is nowhere to be found. That's just a fact. That's just the truth. Now, what does people's law look like? That's different. That's where you and I come in. Now, you may say that the founders are evil. You have to consider the context of history, the time in which they were living in. They lived in a world where everybody agreed with slavery to some extent or another. Obviously not the slaves, but you can track back the ancestors of slaves, and I guarantee you their family, their ancestry, they had slaves, right? It's like the Dahomey tribe that they tried to depict in this Woman King movie, trying to pretend like the Dahomey tribe was actually some type of champions for anti-slavery when they were the total opposite, just a total fraud. But that's what Hollywood tries to do: set narratives instead of telling true stories. The Dahomies were a bunch of slave owners, ugly women, female warriors, and that's the truth. More than likely, they were kind of third-tier females that the king wanted nothing to do with, didn't find them attractive enough, so they became warriors. That's basically the story. All right, so obviously there's more to it, but that's a portion of the story. All right, so now here's People's Law. Here's what the founders were interested in, and it doesn't matter. You can knock the founders all you want. They built the most genius system ever. So here's People's Law. They considered themselves a commonwealth of free men. So they considered everybody free men, regardless of your color. I know it's hard for you guys to believe this because you weren't taught this. If you went to any government school or now brainwashed academic institution known as colleges and universities. But the truth of the matter, the founders wrestled with slavery, including George Washington. George Washington was for slavery before he turned against it. The same was true with Thomas Jefferson. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they were some benevolent slave owners, but I'm telling you they had a change of heart because they wanted a different system. They wanted a different government where all men were created equal, where all men were free, where all men had a say in the government. Now, I know slavery sucked. It was evil. It was cruel. I will never defend it. But let's not pretend that the world didn't, that slavery wasn't universal. As a matter of fact, slavery existed at least here in the United States, and we ended it in 89 years compared to the world that had it, including Africa, Asia, for thousands. And there's actually more slavery that exists in the world today. And I don't see anybody talking about it. All right. Number 2, all decisions and the selection of leaders had to be with the consent of the people, preferably by a full consensus, not just a majority. So they wanted people to buy into the government. They wanted the people to have a say, and they wanted people to to seriously think about the issue of freedom and say, okay, I agree with this. Let's go with this. This is going to benefit us, right? It'll put a check on criminals. It'll give the government some power to maintain security, whether it's our national security, whether it's local. But I want to check. This still gives me more power. The question is, who has power? At the end of the day, when the politicians derive some type of legislation, spending bill, who has power? Do you have power? Does the federal government have power? If you lose power, that means that's an anti-constitutional bill, in my opinion. Number 3, the laws by which they were governed were considered natural laws given by divine dispensation and were so well known by the people they did not have to be written down. The 10 Commandments. Everybody knows it's wrong to lie, steal, steal, cheat. Everybody knows that. Why do they know that? I believe because God has put the 10 Commandments on your heart. You already know what's good. You already know what's wrong. And that's why it's such a trend when people buck the system. That's why the trans movement is so big. It's people bucking the norms. And we all understand that. We all get that. Number 5, primary responsibility for resolving problems rested, first of all, with the individual. All right. So individual responsibility, then the family unit. All right. Very important. Family, God, country, labor. All right. Then the tribe or the community, maybe the city. All right. Then the region, maybe the county. All right. And finally, the nation, maybe the county or the state. And then finally the nation or the federal government. So our problems should be resolved. First, we should start with us. Can we resolve this issue? Okay, is this too big for me? Let me get my mom, dad, or my mom, or my dad, or my sisters and my brothers involved. Let me see if I can work it out with them. All right, this is too big for them. This is too big for us. What can I do? What problem needs to be resolved at the city level? All right, and we just keep graduating, but we're not to start at the federal government. So we've got it all backwards now. Everybody thinks the solution should come from Washington, D.C., and as a result, we've given them more power and we've lessened our power. Number 6, they were organized into small, manageable groups where every adult had a voice and a vote. They divided the people into units of 10 families who elected a leader, then 50 families who elected a leader, then 100 families who elected a leader, and then 1,000 families who elected a leader. And by the way, they're going back to the Anglo-Saxon common law. That's where the founding fathers derived much of their common law. And the Anglo-Saxons, derived much of their law from the Bible. So there you go. So if you think the Bible isn't relevant, yeah, you're welcome. You're living in the greatest country that God has ever given man because of the Bible. So just say thank you. Be grateful. Number 7, they believe the rights of the individual were considered unalienable and could not be violated without risking the wrath of divine justice as well as civil retribution by the people's judges. This is very important. They believe the rights of the individual were considered unalienable. Every individual has his or her own rights, and those rights should be protected. Those rights should be protected, not forced upon people, but protected. You're free to be you. All right. You can't mandate that other people appreciate who you are, but you're free to be you. It's very, very important stuff. Number 8, the system of justice was structured on the basis of severe punishment, unless there was complete reparation to the person who had been wronged. There were only 4 crimes, and going back to the Anglo-Saxon law, which we copied, basically. All right. So there were only 4 crimes or offenses against the whole people. Number 1, the number 1 reason, betraying their own people. Number 2, cowardice by refusing to fight or failing to fight courageously. Desertion was a big deal. Homosexuality was a big deal. Whatever you may feel about homosexuality, why they felt it was a big deal criminally, you would have to speak to the Anglo-Saxons. But I can tell you this, when it comes to the Bible, we're supposed to procreate. We're supposed to procreate. And here's what we know. Male and female relationships can procreate. It's not homophobic. It's not disparaging. It's a fact that same-sex couples cannot procreate. And so it's right for the federal government, in my opinion, and for the nation and for the local church and for local communities to promote heterosexual relationships. Otherwise, you simply cannot grow a nation. It's really simple. It's not meant to offend you, but if you are, perhaps you should get thicker skin, because that's the truth. Number 9, they always attempted to solve problems on the level where the problem originated. If this was impossible, they went no higher than what was absolutely necessary to get a remedy. Usually only the most complex problems involving the welfare of the whole people or a large segment of the people ever went to leaders for the solution. So if you legitimately try to solve a problem, you try to solve the problem. This is kind of redundant, right? You try to solve the problem, closest to you. Los Angeles has a homelessness crisis. They keep going to the government's office. Perhaps the solution is to go to local authorities, local nonprofit organizations, or what have you. And try to figure out a solution, maybe go to the city council, city commissioners, mayor, so on, et cetera. I think more of these homeless people need to be housed in mental institutions. Perhaps there needs to be some type of work housing relationship scheduled where some people can live in apartments as long as they work, and do so much work per day, take medications and stuff like that. Some people are going to have to be housed in order for the homeless crisis to end. But better that than to put a bunch of people on the streets and just let them die in misery and get on drugs and make your cities disgusting. But perhaps that's a topic for another day. We need to deal with the homelessness crisis. I do want to deal with that. That'll be a good topic, Gabe. But listen, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I want you to understand people's law versus ruler's law. Always look at the federal government and from that perspective. All right. Not political parties, not am I Republican, not am I a Democrat. At the end of the day, the question that you want to sit back and answer is, have I empowered the federal government or have I empowered myself? If you've empowered the federal government, you've done the wrong thing. You've done the wrong thing. I appreciate you tuning in to this edition. Please, guys, support my sponsors, MyPillow.com. Click on that radio listener square, all types of deals there. Just use my name, Carl. Give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Patriot Gold Group, you can call 888-534-3665 for a free investor guide today. Make sure you give them a call. Mention the Carl Jackson Show. And also, don't forget our friends at the Epic Times. Hopefully, you'll get to check out my interview with Larry Elder, or his interview with me, I should say. I was so appreciative of that. It's an honor to be interviewed by Larry Elder. Frankly, admire the man greatly. All right. So you can go to watchepic.com/Carl Jackson. That's watchepic.com/Carl Jackson to get a great deal when you subscribe there. All right, guys, until next time, do not grow weary. Do not grow weary doing good. I almost forgot my own tagline. Do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.